This is Cyber Smokehouse, and I'm Ernie.
And I'm Graeme.
Join us as we grill the minds, dig into the experience, and serve up the stories of leaders in cybersecurity.
Cyber Smokehouse is sponsored by TBD Cyber, a cybersecurity strategy consulting firm.
How do you secure a global footprint that spans thousands of locations and millions of customers? Our guest today knows the answer. He's a cybersecurity executive with deep roots in the retail sector, having previously served as an AVP of cybersecurity and risk and compliance at the Cena Retail Group and working at IBM. He's here to talk about leadership, resilience, and the reality of defending modern networks. Today, he is the CEO of CGS CyberDefense, where he translates decades of enterprise experience into actionable strategies for businesses of all sizes. He is also a good friend to TBD Cyber and me personally, Chris Correia. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ernie. Thanks, Graeme. Thanks for having me. I wish I could say I was an expert, but, my wife likes to remind me I'm not too much of an expert at a lot. She even questions my ability in cyber sometimes. But I appreciate you guys taking the time today to, have a conversation, right? I'd say, in the space we're in, our ability as consultants is more around helping frame a story, right? So the ability to storytell is extremely important in this day and age because our buyers may not be technical anymore, right? So I think, when we think about some of the transition of, where we were 10 or 15 years ago to where we are today, we're talking to boards, we're talking to C-level executives nowadays, and our ability to take what they are accustomed to, which is more around the tooling aspects of things and converting that into business lingo, is our ability to tell the right story to the right audience, right? So that's something that is, I think, has transcended and changed a little bit in the space from where it was years ago. But you guys, I think you see a lot of what we see, right? And what we see is areas of, just call it opportunity. Like what's important when we start looking at an organization's cybersecurity posture, maturity, optimization, call it whatever we want, right? And it's really the ability to control the messaging, which I would say is one of the big things. The ability to control the messaging using lingo such as risk, right? Organizations don't really care too much about the tooling aspects of things. Yes, we need the tools. Yes, we have to be resilient. But when we go to the board or we go to the CFOs or we go to the CEOs of organizations, we have to talk in terms of the business, right? So, one of the things I get harassed about from clients, and I use the analogy all the time, you guys have heard it, right? It's rules before tools, right? If you don't have the proper programs built, the tools have no way to be, checked from a success perspective.
Tell us more.
So, look, I think over the last, I would say, 6-7 years, right? Organizations, especially during COVID times, invested heavily in technology, right? It was a new frontier. We had, associates working from home. We didn't have MFA necessarily set up. There was a lot of need for tooling. And over the course of the last, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it's been a lot of organizations who have been built on tooling. But the concern that you start to realize is that the tools are only as good as the people that are running them, in the sense of understanding what those run books or the criteria is or what the success looks like. The building of programs was never work that I would say organizations wanted to invest in, right? I can't capitalize documentation. I can capitalize technology, can OpEx it, right? But I can't documentation. That's not fun. I don't want to do documentation. I want to play with the shiny new toys, right? So what we were left with was a lot of technology, a lot of overlapping technologies. And I think what I see is a lack of program. right? You go into major organizations that, we both work with, big brands that I'm sure everybody is aware of. And you sit back and you walk in and you assume, just because of who they are as a brand, they're resilient. They have the right programs in place. They have the right technologies in place. They're reporting properly, right? The reality of it is, no, not happening. Sure, they might be mature in some spots, but other spots they're not. So when we look at tooling, or at least when I start looking across the enterprises at tools, there's a lot of overlap. Then you start to say, well, if we start to look at MITRE and we start to look at attack path, the tooling that we have in our security stacks are going to help us identify what we can stop. But because there's overlap of tooling, maybe some of those tools are only covering me 5%, 3%, 8%. But those tools are costing me $500,000, $600,000 a year to maintain. Do I need to continue to maintain them? I don't know. Probably not, because maybe I can use an 80-20 rule. Maybe I can look at it through the lens of risk and quantify what the exposure would be to the business should we not renew it, right? So again, I like to use that analogy, right? Rules before tools, because again, for us as consultants, we want to ensure that we're building the program to be successful with the technology. 5-6 years ago, it was technology, right? And now these programs and the maturity of the programs are starting to play catch up. So a lot of the work that we start to see, right, both of us, is really around maturing organizations' programs, whether they have something and they want to optimize something, or whether they have something and they say, listen, it's too manual and, we can talk about AI when we get to it, but, how do we leverage consultants to help us be more efficient?
And Chris, what do you think drives the behavior where everybody, they see a problem and they want to buy a tool? Is it because, early in the days, it was the people that were the Unix administrator that became the CISO, and they were technologists? And, I think we're maturing now that people are more of a business mindset, but is that why that you see this behavior?
That's a fair comment, right? Our typical CISO, years ago was very technical. There's still a lot of CISOs out there that are very technical, but the businesses are changing, right? A lot of the hires that you start to see out there at some of these bigger organizations, yes, sure, they want to understand the technology. That's important. But what they want is they want somebody that's going to be a strategist, right? Somebody who can work with the business and bring the business to the table and have those conversations from a business perspective, no longer leading with technology, but more so leading with, hey, let's have this conversation. Let me explain to you in business terms why it's important for us to lock down a website, or why it's important for us to put guardrails around AI, whatever it might be. So I think that is indeed the case, Ernie. I think you've seen what was in the past 5-6 years ago was very technical. The role was very technical. And I think it's morphed over the last few years to where it's become a lot more business focused and a lot more strategic. I mean, look, you look at a CISO and you look at, in some organizations that we see who they report into. And I've got organizations we work with, they report into the CTO. And I'm like, how's that work? Right? That's like the hen watching the hen house. So you're starting to see some shifts around new hires in the space that have more of that. They come from the business. They come from a digital background. They come from, any type of business related, I would say, role where they can associate their views and build those relationships at the business side, right? I can't build a business if I just go to my business and talk to them about, Cisco or firewalls or whatever the hell it might be, right? I think that's where it's starting to change. We're starting to see it.
And then you also mentioned something that I've heard a lot, but someone new here may not have heard it, but the art of storytelling in the context of a CISO. What does that mean?
So look here, I'll give you the analogy. Years ago when we would need funding or whatever it was, right? We always led with, I need money for this particular piece of technology, and here's why I need it. And the CFO, the CIO, or whomever you were working with would look at you like you had 10 heads, right? Where it started to shift is that I've taken the approach where I would go back to a CIO or CEO and I'd say, hey, look, there's a gap in our security posture, right? Great, whatever that might mean. And in order for us to secure the posture and make it tighter so that we don't have any issues and you're not in the Wall Street Journal or wherever you might be, I'm going to need you to invest $500,000 for this technology to help the security posture. As a result of that, should you invest it, I can also tell you that I can drive the risk of the organization down by $2 million. Well, you start to put numbers to things and executives start to realize you're asking me for $500,000 and you're telling me you can drive out $2 million. That's a no-brainer. The conversation has shifted now from I need technology, I want technology, and here's what I need it for, to, hey, look, I'm going to present you with a business case. I'm going to present you with an option. Should you want to invest in it? Here's what we can do. Should you not want to invest in it? This is what's going to happen, right? So again, the ability to tell the right story to the executives or whomever you're working with is very important. You have to be able to tell the right story.
And I think some of the challenge that typical security leaders have is that's a comfortable space for them. When you start talking about risk quantification, it's like, now I have to have the confidence in the ability to say, this the amount of risk that I'm going to mitigate. And obviously the investment's probably easier to quantify because it's probably some technology and some consulting or whatever it is, right? But the other side of it, how much risk am I going to try and mitigate with this action, is a tough space, or how much of unaddressed risk we have in the organization. So what's been your experience in trying to socialize this concept with security leaders and others, CIOs and others?
So I think, Graeme, probably, 12, 15 years ago, right? The concept of quantifying any type of risk was a foreign idea, right? It wasn't something that anybody was comfortable talking about, right? It's a crock of shit, that the numbers aren't real. You can't, tell me the numbers are right. You can't even show me the math, right? And I think we've morphed to more over the last, 15 years or so. We've morphed to more of I think quantification has to be directional. What quantification allows us to do is have a fact-based conversation and not an emotional one, right? Go back to what I said. If I go to my boss and I say, hey, I need $500,000 because I need to buy this technology and I need it and I need it now. And he says, no. Well, I'm aggravated, right? And I'm pissed off. He doesn't know my job. He doesn't understand. He doesn't respect where I'm coming from. As opposed to the flip side of that, to say, hey, look, the risk to the organization is somewhere between $0 and $2 million. There's a risk. We can argue the number till we're blue in the face, but the reality of the situation, there's a risk somewhere. You can choose to invest or you can choose not to. So I think the ability to quantify things has to be at least somewhat, I would say, directional. It's not perfect. By no means is it meant to be perfect. There's models out there There's a gazillion companies that are coming out, and every other day now with AI, everybody's got, Monte Carlo simulations. They can run, 5 million of them at once. Like, it's getting to the point now where you have to be smart on that storytelling piece. You have to understand your audience. You have to understand what makes the audience tick, right? If I'm talking to a CFO, I'm going to talk to him in dollars and cents. If I'm going to talk to my boss who's a CIO, I'm going to talk to him in technology, and I'm going to talk to him in dollars and cents, right? So again, your ability to understand who you're talking to from a quantification perspective, especially, is important, but directionally it has to be right. So that's kind of where I see it. It just helps take away that emotional conversation and kind of cements it into more of a fact-based conversation.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I think, look, I touched on it a little bit, but I think it's a big piece, and we need to talk about it, right? We got to talk about AI, right? It's like the buzzword. Everybody wants to talk AI, right? If I don't get once a day from a partner or a company who wants to work with us, they've got the best AI out there, right? So the reality is, with language models have been around since the 70s, right? Great. IBM had a great AI model called Watson for years. But guess what? They didn't do anything with it because all it was a marketing piece. Now, all of a sudden, over the last few years, last year and a half, 2 years, right? The language models have become more sophisticated. They've become smarter because I would say there's some learning opportunities for us all. But what I will say is that if we as consultants are not leveraging AI to our ability, then we're fools, right? So if you think about that, and you think about clients that we work with who struggle with, what do I do? It's the Wild Wild West, right? We hear it all the time. Everybody's got AI. I got a development team who's developing AI. I don't have guardrails in place, or, hey, I go to Microsoft, or, hey, I go to Google, and that's what my norm's going to be. And then you've got the guy in the back office at the store building, language models for golf simulators. I think AI has a place in our world. There's absolutely no question it has a place. But the human element still needs to come into play because we still need to fact check what's going on with the models. The models are being educated by, a lot of different inputs from a lot of different areas of the world, people, different levels. And if you don't fact check your AI model, then you might be having a little bit of an issue, right? But I do believe that we have to use AI to our advantage when we're dealing with clients, right? If our clients are using it, we need to use it because we need to experience what they're experiencing so that we can help them when they say, hey, I've got AI all over the place. What do I do? Right? How do I create, some guardrails or some controls around AI? Some organizations have started down that road and doing a great job. But the technology is constantly changing. It's changing extremely fast. Now you've got AI, you've got deepfakes, you've got, voiceovers. There is so much going out there that organizations need to use, I would say, education around AI much more. They need to educate their employees. They need to educate their remote work staff, right? Just because an email comes through saying that I changed my bank account and it says Chris Correia doesn't mean that it's really me, right? So, think about the training, think about phishing exercises, think about all of those things and how those work with AI, right? AI has become extremely sophisticated. But again, I think for us in the consulting space, we have to use it. There's no reason not to use it, right? To fact check it, right? We have to have the experience to know when the model is creating something, whether or not there's value there.
I can tell you just from simple statements of work in my early consulting days, just looking at a blank sheet of paper saves me a lot of time.
Well, and even like think about PowerPoints, right? Think about how many like we put we'd be PowerPointing clients to death, and it would take us time. Now I can leverage AI to create a PowerPoint deck for me, tweak it, do whatever I need to do with it, and use it as a guiding principle for a call or whatever it might be. So again, look, AI is not going anywhere. You can choose to embrace it or you can choose to turn a blind eye to it. But the reality of the situation is it's here to stay. Now, is it going to take our jobs? Yeah, we can all argue. But, at the end of the day, I think you got to embrace it. You got to leverage the technology that's out there.
Yeah, and I think from if you look at a security organization, back to the kind of programmatic stuff, right? There's a lot of inefficiencies in things we do, and I think AI can help with a lot. I mean, it's really automation in many ways, right? But it's automation leveraging AI. I think about like third party risk management as one area, for example, where where I think AI can really help with a lot of the analysis and um, and determining where the risks are in an organization, right? By either reviewing questionnaires or looking at public source data or whatever, right? So there's a lot of things there that, as an example, another area to me is the SOC, right? The initial triaging of information. It's really efficient at stuff like that. So there's some obvious places where it fits in the security organization, but there's as it develops and as time goes on, there's going to be other places as well. But often what we're doing is automating things and making those things more efficient.
That's right. I've, we have a client and we were asked, they said, listen, Chris, we've been challenged to take 25 to 30% out of the budget by introducing automation. And he didn't say AI, Graeme, right? He said automation. He goes, so what I need to understand is what are those areas where I can leverage automation to help me start chunking off some of the goals that the organization has, right? The SOC, that's an easy one, right? We all know that tier 1 and tier 2 becomes extremely noisy. How do I use AI to weave through some of that noise, right? Right? How do I take, policy standards and controls, upload them into a language model and say, hey, based on the new regulatory stuff that's going on, where are my gaps, right? So I think, the client in this case, we've kind of provided them, a high level understanding of where that cost can be taken out. The SOC's the number one, right? And really, it's good we talk about SOC because we've all been around long enough to see the evolution of the SOC, right? It's no longer, let me wait and be reactive to somebody telling me I have a problem. It's now about threat intel. It's now about attack paths. It's now more about, industry, right? Not everything needs to be looked at. I mean, if there's a, vulnerability or an attack path, and I've got to be sitting in a data center and connected to a server. It's not the reality of what it is. But, years ago, that's the stuff we'd go chase because we didn't have any other way to do it. So operationally, I think things are changing from an operational perspective for sure, right? That tier 1, tier 2 organizations are like, that's not the business I want to be in. A lot of the big consulting companies that we all know that are overseas are starting to get smarter and leveraging the AI or the operational technology so that they can be more efficient, but I think that, the SOC or the operational side of things is dramatically changing. I don't need a team of, analysts analyzing noise 24/7 anymore. Let a tool do it for me. Let a language model do it for me, whatever it might be. So, yeah, I agree.
Man, Chris, there's a lot more we can unpack. We may have to have you back on this, but there are other areas that we want to cover. And interesting, I want to talk about leadership and building teams. And also very curious because, you have a strong background working for big, Fortune 500 companies, but then now you're going on this journey like we are building your own company, right? So, what are top things just in building out teams that you could talk about? And what are the differences between, when you were at big company versus now that you get to control everything? What are things that have worked well in building out teams?
Look, the journey has been long. One of the things being in the retail space, like I had been for a number of years, culture was ingrained in me, right? Culture was what drove the organizational success. When I left retail and I went into the consulting world, right? Culture was very important to me. Relationships were even more important to me. I walked away from the consulting avenue because I'm not a transactional individual. I don't like to transact. I like to build relationships. So that being said, when you look at leadership, right, this is a relationship business. When you hire people, it's about a relationship. It's about a cultural fit. I don't care if they've got PhDs, law degrees, or anything else. It's how are they going to fit into the culture and how are they going to perform with one another? And in some cases, you hire, or I shouldn't say I hire based on those pieces first and foremost. I've learned the hard way. I've hired because talent is great. They've got a great resume. They interview extremely well. And then you bring them into an organization like us and they're lost because they don't know how, they only know how to be an individual contributor because that's what they're used to being. They don't know how to play on the team, right? Baseball is a team sport. For me, I'm like a baseball team, right? I'm not a tennis player. I'm not a golfer, right? My team is about, baseball or hockey or basketball. It's multiple people with all different types of skill sets that have to come together to deliver results for our clients, right? So cultural fit, first and foremost, is extremely important to me. Transparency, right? For the people out there watching this, they understand how I am and what makes me tick. And I would say that one of the important things is being true, not only to myself, but the cultural values of what I'm trying to build, right? I'm trying to build an organization that provides white glove service to clients, right? That I build relationships and understand who those clients are, who their families are, what their interests are. I do the same thing with my employees, right? Because my employees aren't just butts in the seat doing delivery work for me. They're people. They're people that have families. There's people that have interests outside of what I do, right? We're not building spaceships. I'm not fighting cures for cancer. But what I am doing is I'm trying to build a team that can go out there and win a game.
And has your style changed a lot?
Ernie, that's a loaded question. So look, I think our relationship when I was a client of Ernie's, right? It was more about tough love. I was in control, right? I'd bang my hand on the table and say, bullshit, this is the way it's got to be, right? I think running an organization, you can't be like that. You have to be softer, right? That softer touch or that ability to be like, hey, listen, I really don't know everything I'm supposed to know. Like, that's why I'm bringing people in and surrounding myself to be successful with the right people. So I think my personality, has shifted from being, I would say, more of that dictatorish individual who was like, hey, you're going to do it my way because I'm sitting in the seat. And now it's more about you tell me, guys, team, what is it that we should be doing? Are we all aligned, right? So doing the inclusion piece is more how I've matured, I think, from a career perspective. No longer am I yelling and screaming and getting my blood pressure up, right? Again, I realize that I need to be the face of a business. And if the values of relationships and being transparent. I just need to be a little softer, right? So it's okay. But I know you and I have had a relationship. I think we talked about it when we were together a couple of weeks ago, but it's been like almost 14, 15 years. Either we worked together or you worked for me and now we help each other out. Right. But I think at the end of the day, that's the relationship and that's the maturity as we grow up in this space. We tend to get a little bit softer and realize the old ways aren't necessarily the best ways.
So, couple other questions. So you have a remote team. You guys are all remote. What do you guys do as good team building events?
So it's good, right? So one of the things that we did last year, we'll do probably the same thing this year. Last year, we kind of did an after holiday get together. I brought everybody into one centralized location. In this case, it happened to be North Carolina, Charlotte, and we had a dinner. We did some nonprofit work with an organization called Dress for Success. So just more about bringing that team together. It was just a way for me to say kind of thank you. Then at Black Hat last year for Vegas, we brought the whole team out. Why? Because again, we're all remote. I need a reason to get everybody together. And that was a good reason, right? There's a conference going on. It's Vegas. Bring everybody together, let them walk the show floor and let them build real relationships amongst themselves. Right. So we do some of that kind of thing. We do biweekly calls where we all get on a call and kind of talk about the work, kind of what's going on in everybody's life. But look, again, the remote aspects of things is pros and cons, right? Look at the three of us, right? We sit in bedrooms, sit in offices day in and day out, unless we get on airplanes and we fly all over the United States to go visit clients. We're home, right? There's distractions. There's, things that don't necessarily work well. But at the end of the day, I think we're all adults and we all kind of know what's expected of us. So being remote shouldn't matter as long as the work and the clients are happy.
Oh, that's great. All right. I got one more for you. I've been impressed and I'm actually very curious about your internship program that you've actually got one going as such a small startup company. How did you do that and what were the lessons learned? And,
So, we've talked about leadership, right? But at the end of the day, somebody gave the three of us an opportunity back in the day. I'm a believer that we need to pave the way for the next generation of cybersecurity executives, consultants, whatever it is. And as I started to think about it, I always drew from my time in the retail space, especially during the summer months where the businesses would come together, the brands would come together and they would have, interns come. So I said, you know what, look, for us to give back to somebody that is in an IT, technology, cyber, law, whatever it might be, let's bring in a couple interns and let's just, let's try it out and see. So last summer we brought in 2 interns. I brought in a gentleman from the Citadel over in Charleston, right? Military. I brought in an individual from Cornell, Ivy League. Not purposely, it just happened that's just how it went down. I will tell you that the internships, the inquiries that we received, thousands, right? And you can't get through thousands. And for these individuals, these young adults that are in college who are trying to get internships, right? I wanted to bring somebody in because me personally, I wanted to give back. Right? Again, somebody gave us a chance. I want to give somebody else a chance to learn and grow and be around clients and, all the craziness that goes along with running these businesses. So learnings, right? So what I learned was they needed a project. So they're here for a month and a half, 2 months, whatever it is. So we teed up a couple of different projects that they owned. The gentleman from the Citadel, and look, both interns were phenomenal. Awesome. But remember, they're juniors in college. They have no experience in life, right? So like having them get up for an 8:30 a.m. call Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. Having, pointed conversations because, they might not be doing what we need them to do, right? It's tough love. But what we found was the gentleman from the Citadel, military background, structured, regimented, you tell him what to do, he's going to do it. He's off and running. The individual from Cornell, he was a builder, a thinker, strategies like, hey, how can I make my life easier by creating, and in this case, we talked about AI earlier, right? He created an AI model, Graeme around TPRN, right? So there were a couple of different pieces. It just happened to be that it was more about the ability to give back. That's what was important. I don't think there's enough executives out there in this crazy world of cyber that take the time to give back, to be completely honest, right? They have a void. They need to fill a job. They want the best candidate. Well, it's not always the best candidate, right? Sometimes you got to look at what the potential is of these individuals and where they want to go and how you want to help them get there, right? So we did a couple interns. We'll do a couple again this summer. Our HR individual, she kind of gets them down to like 6. She's been rifling through hundreds. But I would say we've got a good pool. Again, I worked in women's retail apparel, right? So I've been surrounded by women my whole life. CGS has a lot of women that work with them, right? That work for me. And I love it because they bring a different dynamic to the space, right? This is, everybody likes to say it's a man's world. I could care less, right? I am all about women. I want more women. I want more women in cyber. So the first shot I get to, bring women along and hire women out, internships or employees or contractors or whatever, if they've got the skill set, that's what I love. I love trying to give back, but being in that women's retail apparel, I've always kind of been geared towards women, and it's always kind of worked out in my favor. But we've got a lot of women that work for us, which I think is absolutely awesome, So, I encourage you guys, maybe it's a day late, dollar short, maybe it's not this year, but maybe it's next year. But look at internships. You've got a lot of local colleges, right? You can do lectures, you can get involved with the local schools, and they appreciate that because you're giving back and you're not asking for anything.
So, Chris, we talked a lot about AI. What else out there concerns you, or if you take a look at emerging technologies and things that are coming down the pike?
I'll use the word loosely as vanilla can be: resiliency. So, when we look at resiliency through the lens of where we are, right? We've grown up in cyber. So we think, tabletops, IR retainers, all this stuff, which is great. Well, what happens to the business, right? I'm going to keep going back to the business because what we don't do a good job of is creating a playbook on organizational resiliency. Do I have a BCP? Do I have disaster recovery? Right? Every organization is going to tell you, thumbs up. Yep, we do. Great. How often you test it? Maybe once a year. Really? So you're going to fight one time a year, and your muscle memory is going to always remember one time a year. And your new AVPs and VPs and CEOs who have just come into the organization over the last year know exactly what they're supposed to do, right? The answer is no, right? So I believe that one of the things that I'm starting to see more is organizational resiliency, right? How does organizational resiliency work with HR? Well, what do you mean? Well, why is HR? Well, HR hires the roles for organizations. If the role has been identified as a critical role in a situation, again, pick on supply chain, right? We've got a VP of supply chain and all of my warehouse systems go down. I'm brand new to the company. What do? I don't know. You got a plan? How can I move merchandise around? How can I ship? Right? So I think what I'm starting to see is organizations are starting to look at resiliency in a continual resiliency program, meaning they're testing on a more continuous basis. They're not waiting once a year. Tabletops to me are a thing of the past. What I like to do now is I like to say, let's do a reverse tabletop. Let's bring everybody to the table and talk about what they think they should be doing versus what they should be doing, right? And you usually find gaps and opportunities for improvement where you can then work with clients to cheer up their, the resiliency play. So again, organizational resiliency, sure. On the cyber side, locked and loaded, we have to have it, right? We got a little insurance, this, that, and the other thing, tabletops, blah, blah, blah. We go through that motion. But when you start to involve the business, it starts to become a whole different conversation. I'll give you an example. I don't know if it was last year, year before, whenever the heck it was, right? Right around Thanksgiving timeframe, there's an organization out there that has probably 90% of, I'll call it, the ability to replenish product. Just leave it at that. They had a ransomware attack, software goes down. All the companies, all 90% of these companies that use this one particular company, right, for all of this replenishment, didn't have a understanding of what to do. So what did some companies do? Well, whatever they sold last week or the week before, just send it again. That's all we can do because we don't know what's going on. Well, then you got shrink, you got spoilage, you got all kinds of different things going on, right? Well, guess what? Did you create a different disaster recovery plan around when something like that happens to your supply chain? Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. I don't know. But again, the business and resiliency, organizations need to test that on a more continual basis. They don't do it today.
I mean, it's right now, there's a lot of organizations probably thinking about their source of oil, right? And how's that going to, how disruptions in that supply chain are going to impact their production capabilities and things going forward. So, yeah, it just things can come up quickly, and yeah, having thought through the implications of those and how you're going to manage through them, that's critical. All right, Chris. One other question here is, so how do you and your team keep up to date? What's you mentioned Black Hat. I'm sure that's going to conferences is one thing, but what other things do you do both personally and as a team to sort of keep up to date on the latest trends?
What's going on in the space? So there's obviously, there's newsletters. We all get newsletters with the top 10, 15 things, right? There's some good stuff that's out there. I think a lot of the partners we work with have a lot of threat intel. So we're constantly looking at threat intel and kind of looking at threat intel more from an industrial perspective, right? Industries, we work in a lot of different industries. Some of the threats that are out there aren't pertinent to certain industries, right? So I think it's that. I think it's your news. I think it's your blogs. I think it's Reddit. There's information all over the place. But I think you have to be aware of the fact you need to stay up with it, right? You should be reading something on a daily basis, at least to educate yourself to understand what the hell's going on out there, right? Because there might be something that's important that you're not going to know about until that sock starts beeping, right? So I don't have anything specific that I go after, but I do get newsletters. I do a lot of reading on the web. And again, I've got a lot of partners that provide us a lot of intel that we look at.
Hey, so Chris, so forward thinking, what are you looking at for the future, the next year or so? What are your initiatives?
Look, I think first and foremost, it's to continue to build an organization, continue to scale, right? Continue to deliver value. I think resiliency is going to be huge. I really, truly do. I think I think we are. We're starting to hop on more resiliency conversations now. I think AI obviously is a big piece around, I would say, control standards, policies around AI. So again, more of that consultative work. Graeme mentioned TPRM. TPRM isn't going anywhere anytime soon. That'll continue to be a program that needs to continually be optimized, right? The old way of doing things is not necessarily going to be the new way. So I would say that I'd be putting some of my money in that space. I think risk will continue to percolate. I think as the boards and the executives become a little bit more educated, right, around the storytelling aspects of what it is cyber is doing, I think there'll be a piece of risk management or GRC. I would say those are a couple of the areas that I see coming up for the rest of 26 into 27. But as the three of us know, right, things change pretty quickly in this space. What's today is not tomorrow. But I think, again, having a true foundation around what you want to do to help your clients, how you want to help them, and what you want to help them with, and having a perspective on it is what's going to be important for us all to, continue to be successful.
Awesome. Well, Chris, we've spent a bit of time learning from you. Now we want to learn about you. So tell me, how did you get into cyber?
I went to school for criminal justice. I got out of school from criminal justice and I wanted to go into law enforcement. I was in law enforcement for about a year and a half. I had an opportunity to relocate from, at the time we were living in Rhode Island. I had an opportunity to relocate down to Connecticut. Got hooked up with this retail company that was, I don't know, $400-500 million. They kind of put me into a role to learn how to distribute merchandise to a store. I lasted probably 6 months in that role until they said, yeah, this isn't going to work. You got to get the hell out of here. They shifted me over to an operational role where I learned how to set up new stores. We were rapidly growing. We were opening about 50 to 75 new stores a year. So they needed temporary warehousing, transportation, like the whole gamut, right? So spent a lot of time in operations. And then, from an organizational perspective, as I was there through the years, the organization continued to grow. The organization then started making acquisitions. And as acquisitions came into play, my role continued to morph, right? I like to say that they looked at me as a fixer, or in our case, it was a cleaner, right? There was no body. Chris goes in, Chris cleans it up. There's no blood. There's no anything. Like, everything's good. He's fixed the problem. He's removed any signs of a murder, and we've moved on, right? So they used to put me into a lot of roles that were broken. I got into IT. I was crawling around. That's the time when we used to have to wear suits to work, or ties. I was crawling around on floors, installing, desktops. I was doing Novell. I was running coaxial cables under raised data center floors. I was doing a lot of that stuff, and I really enjoyed the transition from law enforcement, which is different every day. You never know what you're going to walk into, to the IT side, which was transitioning every day. You never knew what the problem was going to be. So, through the years, I kind of bounced around into a lot of different roles and responsibilities. Marketing was one of the areas that I oversaw. I had the internet, I had web developers, I had private label credit card, and, I just continued to evolve as the business continued to grow. So for me, the career started out liking the fact that it wasn't consistent every day. It was always something different. Retail for me was always something different. There was always a new challenge. There was always another body to get rid of, or another thing to fix, or another thing to clean, whatever it might have been. So, that's kind of how the career evolved. And then, I was fortunate enough, honestly, to have an individual towards the later part of my career who kind of understood my personality, which we kind of talked about earlier, and, helped me mature and grow in the space to the point where I could go off and leave the organization and go understand the consulting aspects of life, to then take it to what we've got going on now, which is more, building an organization from ground up.
Yeah, that's awesome. So looking back at it, obviously a lot of different things you've done in your career. Is there any advice you'd give your younger self, any advice that you would give people coming up in the cybersecurity space?
Yeah, I think, for me, it would be less emotional, right? I think in the early part of my career, I was a pretty emotional individual, right? Again, right? We'd yell, scream, bitch, and moan. But I think there's a different way to convey the story, right? And it doesn't have to be an emotional way. So I think for me, it's being less emotional. I think that's one piece. I think the other piece is being very transparent and being very fact-based, right? You can't argue with facts. You can argue with emotion. So I think that's the piece for me. If I were to look back at the early part of my career, I think for anybody coming into the space today, what I would say is continue to build your relationships, your network. I think our younger generation tends to hide behind these screens or their phones. They don't have the art of the relationship and having a conversation with somebody that's sitting across the table for them. I think feeling comfortable, getting outside of that comfort zone for the younger to feel like they can ask a question and not be reprimanded or told they don't know what they're talking about. I think they should feel comfortable asking questions because they don't know anything. You know, we've got some early professionals that work for us today. They're learning. That's why they're there. We're there to teach them. So, you know, again, less emotion, more fact-based conversation for me. And then, you know, for the generation coming up, it's going to be more about, you know, asking the right questions, showing up, being present, building a relationship, right? Not sitting behind your phone, not trying to be distracted at home.
And I think a key part of it, and you do very well at this, I think key part of this, of the relationship is investing time to understand the people that you're working with, they're building a relationship with, right?
It's, you know, it's the heart of what I want to do and what I've done and, you know, how I've been brought up in the space. It's a relationship business. I still, listen, the people that work for me, with me, Ernie, you, whatever, right? We've all crossed something. We have a relationship for some reason, whether you worked with me, for me, or whatever. But the relationship is key. You've got to continue to foster the relationships. So I'm going to leave you with this.
This is Cyber Smokehouse, Chris. We gotta.
You want to get smoking, but it's pouring rain out, so I ain't smoking tonight. Anyway, but you know, again, I think, look, for us, when we talk about smoking, right? Look, I got what do I have? A flame, and I got a green egg.
What do you cook on them?
What am I cooking, right? So I think one of the things I've learned when you look at smoking, it's low and slow, right? So if you take the low and slow methodology and you say, look, in consulting, it has to be low and slow, right? You cannot sprint to the finish line to do your deliverables because you're gonna screw something up and the food ain't gonna taste good. So you got to go slow. You got to understand what these clients want. You got to understand what the goals are, the success criteria, right? You got to go slow. It's just like when we smoke. You know, you get some burnt ends. We do lamb chops. Last Sunday, we did steak.
You use it all the time. I did not know this. You use the green egg all the time?
Yeah. But I cheat. In full transparency, I use the green egg, and there's a device that allows me on my phone to control the fluctuation of the air coming in and out.
That's not, you're cheating. You're just using the technology. That's
Technology to my advantage, right? Just like we talked about using AI. So I'm using the technology to smoke, but it's great, right? So, you know, when I'm on calls like this, I can throw something on, let it smoke for a couple of hours, and then everybody at home's got dinner.
That's not cheating. That's working smarter.
Yeah, working smarter, not harder, right? And then, you know, we've got a flame grill that we'll grill on. We do a lot of vegetables and things like that. And living in Florida, honestly, I can use it every day if I wanted to, right? Weather's always great, except for today. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, right? But again, right, the methodology and the mentality of low and slow holds true in the consulting space that we have. You can't rush this stuff. You can't rush the relationship, right? Again, client says to you, hey, I'm not ready. Okay, no problem. Like, don't keep sending emails out. Don't keep calling them saying you're ready, you're ready, you're ready. Just slow down. It'll get there. It'll cook at some point. Just, you got to go slow.
You're the first one to tie it back into the full conversation.
I'm trying to help it out.
That's awesome, Chris. Hey, listen, how can people connect with you?
Look, the website is obviously out there, CGS CyberDefense.com. Yeah, it's a mouthful. Or you can get to me via LinkedIn, Chris Correia, Correia. Or you can send me an email if you want, right? It's chris.correia@cgscyberdefense.com. Feel free to drop me a line, inquiry, ask me a question. I'm always happy to help in any way I can. But again, I think for us, I appreciate the fact that you guys entrusted me in coming on this call and having a conversation and asking me what's important to me. I think I speak for, the consulting world in general, right? We all have the right intent. We all want to do what's best for our clients. And I think for us, it's less about transactions and more about value in the relationship.
Well, hey, thank you, Chris.
It's a pleasure. I appreciate it, guys. It's good to see both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, audience. And if you learned something today or laughed, please tell someone about the podcast. This has been another exciting episode of the Cyber Smokehouse, and we'll see you next time. And that wraps another episode. Thank you for joining. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at cybersmokehouse.com. Cyber Smokehouse is sponsored by TBD Cyber, a cybersecurity strategy consulting firm.
TBD Cyber works with organizations to assess their security program, develop and implement security initiatives, and optimize their security investments. We work in areas as broad as data security, risk management, cyber resilience, and security architecture. Our clients value us for our extensive expertise and independent advice, which is why we do not sell security products or deliver managed security services. If you want to work with a trusted advisor, we can help. You can learn more at tbdcyber.com. We'll see you on the next one.